Hey everybody, it's February. Let's talk about Fillmore. Now, why specifically February? Well, that's because it's it's Paraprofessional Appreciation Day, a day that honors the support staff members of schools, and this includes hall monitors. Based on the premise of Fillmore, I thought it'd be appropriate. But yeah, okay, sure, it's also Black History Month, but that's a little too on the nose for my liking. It's really because it's Paraprofessional Appreciation Day. Oh wait, that shit's in April. Roll the tape, please. Roll the tape. Roll the tape, please. Hey everybody, I'm Andyb. And man, it feels good to speak over top the green border again. I know it's been quite a while since I last reviewed an animated show. Specifically since May of last year. But I'm back. I'm back! And what better show to come back with than Disney's Fillmore?
Fillmore, I'm on it.
Fillmore is a Disney animated series created by Scott M. Gimple, who's known for his work on The Walking Dead. The show originally aired in September 2002 and ran until January 2004. It ran for 2 seasons and had a total of 26 episodes. It's a show I remember fondly, having watched it when I was younger. It's also a show that's kind of been lost to time. It wasn't the most popular show in its lifetime, and with each passing year, Fillmore falls farther into obscurity. So with this video, I'd like to shed some light on a forgotten gem from 2000's past. Because at face value it seems to be just a crime drama for kids, is actually an action-packed, well-written, and thoroughly engaging show. But what is it about Fillmore that makes it so beloved amongst the people who remember it? Well, it's time for me to go undercover as a competent reviewer as we take a look at Disney's Fillmore. A parody and tribute to 70s cop shows like The Streets of San Francisco, Fillmore follows the adventures of the Safety Patrol, a team of preteen officers who solve crimes and take down troublemakers at X Middle School, a big middle school in the suburbs of fictional Minneapolis. One of the school's most notable features is its huge number of extracurriculars and clubs. I mean a ridiculous number. And we're not talking about your standard soccer or debate teams here, okay? We're talking meditation club, unicycle squad, chowder club, compost club. The very first club we ever hear about from the first episode is the Bathroom Steering Committee.
The X-Middle School Bathroom Steering Committee.
And that's just to name a few. I swear the whole list must look like War and fucking Peace. Even the episode with the more standard chess club features a vanilla ice flavored chess master named Checkmatey.
And that's mate, y'all. Yeah, y'all better recognize it's checkmating. Checkmate is the bomb, and he's full of wisdom.
I am so glad I am not making that up.
You just rhymed bomb with wisdom. Now, that is pathetic.
Being that the show takes place in middle school, the crime showcased are parodies and preteen versions of real crimes. You've got theft of library books, kidnapping of virtual pets, bathroom stall vandalism, lab frog races. There's a lot of funny and clever equivalents, but we'll get more into that later in the video. But just before we move on, here's a slightly interesting fact. Every character in Fillmore, whether minor or major, is named after a street sign in San Francisco, specifically their last names. Although creator Scott M. Gimple lived in Los Angeles, he had many friends in San Francisco and was a frequent visitor. And the first character to receive the sign naming treatment was Fillmore himself. Gimple loved the name and thought it fit really well with the character. So seeing how well his sign naming scheme worked for his lead character, he decided to do the same for the others. And so these surname references are a subtle yet cool homage to the city. So now that we know their naming origin, let's start introducing some characters. First up, our titular title character, Cornelius Fillmore, a past delinquent and committer of crimes such as chalk boosting and back-talkery, who was eventually drafted into the Safety Patrol. Fillmore employs many traits of your classic 70s cop protagonist. He's a capable crime fighter armed with both athletic and intellectual abilities. With a strong sense of morals and justice, he's always committed to solving the case, even at the expense of expensive property. Even his lingo feels right out of the 70s.
Listen, man, ain't no thing but a chicken on a string.
Oh, and you can't forget his catchphrase.
Disco, 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 disco.
But amongst all his kick-ass crime-fighting skills, he's got heart. And because of his delinquent past, Fillmore has sympathy for other past offenders looking to turn things around. So in summary, Fillmore's a super bad brother who's out of sight and knows what's right. This cool cat knows how to get the lowdown on the showdown, and when this Mac's on the attack, the perps watch their backs, and if they try to split, he won't hesitate to crack down on them jive turkeys. And before you ask, I am indeed the proud owner of an Earth, Wind & Fire Greatest Hits CD, and I've watched my fair share of Black Dynamite. So you better believe I am a certified soul brother. But in all seriousness, Fillmore's an all-around solid main protagonist. Ingrid III, Fillmore's trusted and talented partner. Voiced by the beloved Tara Strong, adding to her list of angsty teen girl performances. Now she may don the goth look, but Ingrid isn't as gloomy as she appears. I describe her more as alternative with her numerous quirky interests.
I've got to get one of those. That's how I feel about my new Gato Power Wombato bedsheets. It's the finest in wombat anime linens.
You have an Abe Lincoln lunchbox. Since when do you care what everybody thinks?
Hey, Abe Lincoln is cool. Oh, good point.
Although she initially hated ex-middle school, she soon found a friend in Fillmore and was eventually drafted into the safety patrol. Her most notable trait is her photographic memory, which she uses to recall important details. She's agile, she's one of the smartest kids in school, and just like Fillmore, she has her own catchphrase.
Crackers, 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 crackers.
You know, there's something ironic and fitting about a girl as pale-faced as snow-covered marshmallows going around spouting crackers. But then again, I suppose it's better she's the one saying crackers than Fillmore, because then it takes on a whole new meaning.
These crackers have gone too far! Dynamite!
And while we're talking about Ingrid, here's some more Fillmore trivia. Ingrid makes a cameo appearance in American Dragon Jake Long. In the episode entitled The Halloween Bash, there's a Halloween party and Ingrid can be seen in the background. Christian Roman, the director for the first season of Jake Long, was also an animator, character designer, and director for Fillmore. More so than that, Scott Gimple actually wrote the Halloween Bash episode, so this cameo is a small nod to their past work. Getting back to Ingrid, the dynamic between her and Fillmore makes them a great duo. When one of them is faced with trouble, either with the case or with personal matters, the other is there for backup and personal support. I also like how the writers didn't try to create a romantic relationship between them. I always find it to be a cheap move whenever they pair the female and male lead together, even when there's no reason to. They're simply partners and good friends. Now every good force has gotta have their commissioner, and in Fillmore there's Junior Commissioner Vallejo. He's both large and in charge. He's stern, he's by the book, but he's not without heart. He's ultimately looking out for his officers' best interests, and he's demonstrated that in a number of instances. And when he's not busy laying out the situation, he's usually chewing out Fillmore for being such a loose cannon and wrecking property.
Fillmore! Did you destroy a school sandwich machine chasing down the lunch bag bandit?
And now, just for shits and giggles, let's go over the top 5 most expensive things that Fillmore has destroyed, and Vallejo has yelled at him for.
Fillmore! Why'd I get a bill from the art lab for 10 plastic chairs, 8 wooden easels, a velvet chaise, and a spear? 2 bikes, completely destroyed. Hundreds of dollars in damage. A $300 costume? Folsom's so happy, she didn't even mention the $700 worth of office supplies you trashed. A $6,000 floor waxer? Fillmore!
Principal Folsom, the principal of X Middle School, the queen bitch of the whole operation. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. Folsom's a tough, cutthroat woman who's often looking for good press. She's constantly chastising the safety patrol whenever something goes wrong during a case, often threatening to shut them down.
You don't? The Safety Patrol headquarters could make a great tap studio.
You know, considering these kids are your school's primary line of defense, you'd think they'd be a little less expendable. I guess there's just no love for the officers in orange. It's like part of me hates when she's obnoxious, but the other part of me loves to hear her rant. And her performance given by Wendy Malick makes her dialogue that much better.
And that's not gonna happen. Not on my 24-karat watch. You got that? You hear that? That's how it's been since the answer sheets got stolen. I hear it in my sleep. I add milk to my crisp rice cereal, and it sounds like my phone! Let's see what's in the news today. And what's this headline? Fillmore, I hate macaroni!
She does a good job playing judge, jury, and executioner. Or I suppose in this case, expulsioner. And where there's Principal Folsom, there's also...
Raycliffe!
Vice Principal Raycliffe, Folsom's right-hand man. Considering how much he plays second fiddle to Folsom, you often forget that he's a major authority figure at the school. There's not really much to say about him. He doesn't really offer much other than occasional exposition and a punchline here or there.
She's gonna turn HQ into a personal golf cart storage facility.
Don't think she's joking.
Then kick your careers from here to... Raycliffe!
Shanghai?
No.
Burma?
Try again.
Kazakhstan?
Yes, Kazakhstan.
You thought Fillmore and Ingrid were an unstoppable duo? Well, think again. Alongside Fillmore and Ingrid, we also see a few other recurring safety patrol officers. First, there's Tahamo, or as I like to call her, Mrs. I Think I Found Something.
Fillmore, Ingrid, I've got something. I think I found something. I think I may have found something. I found something you might want to take a look at.
She's the Safety Patrol's forensics expert and the most notable of the recurring officers, contributing to cases and showcasing her forensic skills in a number of different episodes. Then there's Anza, and there's really not much to say about him. It's implied in an episode that he has bodyguard training, but it's never made specific what he does. He also doesn't have much in the way of distinctive personality, but I suppose he represents the generic Safety Patrol officer. Finally, there's O'Farrell, the Safety Patrol's photographer. He's pretty much the comic relief on the force. I mean, hey, they can't all be stern and serious, somebody's gotta bring the fun. Danny's definitely the most upbeat officer, but he's also the least capable.
I assigned O'Farrell. O'Farrell? Fillmore! O'Farrell's not trained to use the stapler, let alone bodyguard somebody.
Do you guys smell that lavender? I mean, where is it coming from?
Alongside the regular cast, the show also had a lot of celebrity voice cameos. A surprising amount, with the majority of episodes featuring special guest voices. We're talking people like Frankie Muniz, Arlie Ermy, Davy Chase, Kyle Gass of Tenacious D.
There's you and there's me, Officer Fillmore. You could say we are what we are.
Everyone who shows up for that war sport recital's gonna expect pralines!
Fillmore, your time of reckoning is nigh.
All right, people. Ears open. The Safety Patrol has an announcement.
And certain guest voices would appear in multiple episodes. One of my favorite cameos comes from the first episode, Tamara Stahl, where Josh Peck of Drake and Josh fame plays a psycho artist and Hannibal Lecter parody named Randall Julian. And he plays the part well.
Cornelius Fillmore, you have a new partner. Charmed, uninspired, unemotional, uninteresting, unimportant. Of course not. You want me to help you catch him. Why should I?
It's spherical!
Sorry you had to see that.
One of the unique elements of Fillmore is how each episode is explicitly broken into 3 acts, most of which have very punny names. And every act is introduced by the legendary Don LaFontaine, one of the most kick-ass voice actors to ever grace the mic.
Today's episode, Test of the Tested. Act 1, By a Lobster Betrayed.
With that kind of voiceover, these act declarations add to the show's dramatic flair and give it an almost cinematic-like quality. And seeing that Dawn is narrated for thousands of movie trailers, I suppose that makes sense. Fillmore is very much a crime of the week type show. Every episode is a self-contained story that can be viewed independent of others. And because of this, there aren't any overarching plots. That being said, there are a number of characters that get reused in different episodes. In many cases, reused characters are simply background extras, but there are some unique cases, like where a previously minor character becomes a major character in a different episode. Even when they play background roles, the reuse of these characters helps give life to the world, and makes it feel like these kids exist outside of their intended plot use. So now that you know the basics, let's get into the specifics. A core component of nearly every Fillmore episode is solving a case. There's a problem at X, and Fillmore and Ingrid need to get to the bottom of it. On one hand, you think it's just a kid's show and the suspects are going to be obvious, but Fillmore's cases are well constructed and do a good job of keeping you guessing. Key bits of evidence can be hidden in plain sight, new information can come up and throw off their current lead, and there's a number of red herrings as well. You can tell there was thought put into these cases, as every story beat feels deliberate. Every scene has its purpose and every detail plays into something. Whether it be a piece of evidence that helps further the case or a dialogue exchange that helps define a character. These cases have a good sense of progression, and by the time the true culprit is confronted, our heroes have a good basis to take them down. Their discovery of the real criminals are well explained and you understand how they got to their conclusion. But the lengths they go for middle school justice are only matched by the criminals they face. Some of the schemes these kids got going are pretty high class for middle school. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was 12, I didn't have the know-how to steal an entire library's worth of books. Forget Grand Theft Literature, I couldn't avoid a late fee for God's sake. One episode even has Fillmore and Ingrid infiltrating an underground casino, and they gamble with a type of snack food currency called schmoits.
You must give me a chance to win back my smoits.
And that's the thing about Fillmore. On one hand, you could say it's exaggerative and over the top. They're in middle school, there's no way this kind of stuff would happen. But on the other hand, I'd say that's kind of the point. Seeing these dramatic preteen parallels of real crimes is part of Fillmore's appeal. Even though these situations are middle school oriented, the show still frames them as dramatic and significant. And because the show treats these crimes as legitimate, you're better able to indulge these situations, and take it seriously enough to suspend your disbelief. The show doesn't try to be perfectly realistic, and it doesn't need to be. Especially with the show being animated, they take advantage of the medium to have these wacky stunts and situations. If this show was trying to be a truly realistic depiction of middle school crime fighting, then it wouldn't be nearly as entertaining. But it's not all interrogations and paperwork. Fillmore has more than its fair share of action-packed chase scenes. The moments where perps are on the run, property gets taken and damaged, and we see some of the unusual characters that make up X-Middle School. The chase scenes are the energetic high points of each episode. We see chases through locker rooms, croquet fields, RC car tracks, even when it's just another chase down the school halls. The paths they take, the ways they get around obstacles, the surrounding bystanders, there's a ton of different elements at play. It makes every chase scene feel unique. It's also during these chase scenes where you notice the show's excellent soundtrack. It primarily consists of up-tempo funk and sweet, smooth jazz. The soundtrack perfectly complements Fillmore's old-school style, while still being appealing to a new school audience. The show offers a good balance of high-octane action and patient investigations, appealing to both the intellects and the adrenaline junkies alike. But not only is the show well-balanced, it's also well-paced. The stories move along at a steady speed, and it never feels like it's dragging on. Now, occasionally you'll have a scene or section that feels kinda quick, but those are few and far between. Between all the chases and detective work, they're able to fit a fair bit of content into 22 minutes while still taking their time to tell a fleshed out story. And that's the mark of a well thought out show. I've seen a number of shows and movies that try to do too much in one sitting and they feel messy and unfocused. Because some writers want the gratification of having dramatic and cool moments, but don't want to do the necessary setup that's required for them to be impactful. Another thing I really like about Fillmore is its variety and story structure. While every episode is broken into the same 3 acts, the stories don't all play out the same. It's not always about finding and revealing the culprit at the end. Sometimes the culprit is revealed early on, and the objective isn't to discover their identity, but it could be to prevent them from harming or stealing something. Sometimes there's more than one culprit. Sometimes a culprit is captured midway through the episode. Sometimes the episode doesn't even take place at X. It's this variety in the stories that keeps Fillmore from getting stale, and it adds a level of unpredictability, which especially for a crime show is a crucial element. Throughout its 2 seasons, Fillmore introduces a vast array of colorful and cartoony characters, and although they can be a bit dramatic, the characters are generally believable. And both the heroes and villains have reasonable motivations for doing what they do. Well, at least most of them.
Decobbing corn is murder, man!
With the villains, their motivations are typically for profit or some kind of personal business. Either way, they aren't just villains for the sake of being evil. There's a functional basis to their criminal activity. Because of the show's self-contained episode format, these characters are static and have distinctive personalities. So even upon a first meeting, you'll quickly understand how these characters operate. But just because they have set personalities doesn't mean they're flat or one-dimensional. The main characters will still have their own character moments and personal stories. It's just that these stories and developments are addressed and resolved within one episode. So even with the self-contained episode format, we still get insights and learn more about our main characters. Every episode ends with either a lesson being learned or a personal conflict being settled. The show definitely has a younger audience in mind, but there's a maturity to its writing. At times, the dialogue and messaging can be really poignant.
You're smart, but you just don't want to think. This person looks this way, so they have to act that way. They talk like this, so they have to do that. Life ain't that easy, man. You got to dig deeper.
Now granted, Fillmore isn't totally timeless. It's still a show of its era, and some of the pop culture references do show its age.
He can make those bishops dance like Brittany with a boa.
You're as solid as a Geodude using his hardened attack.
And I have an eggplant that looks like Fred Durst.
But a few dated references aside, the core writing still holds up very well. While I have a lot of positive things to say about Fillmore, it's obviously not perfect. There are certain story beats I would have written differently, and some chase scenes are weaker than others, but these nitpicks are very dependent on the episode. The one problem that I have that's present throughout the entire show is with its scene transitions. While not the case with every transition, a good number of them cut to the next scene a little too quickly. I mean there are scenes that change before a character finishes talking. There are many instances where they could have just held the shot for an extra second or two, because these fast cuts make the ending of some scenes really choppy. Now this problem certainly doesn't ruin the show, but it's something that could have been improved. Being that the show is full of great episodes, this list wasn't the easiest to make, but I've narrowed down 5 episodes that I'd say are my favorites. Throughout this review, I've been using clips that don't spoil any major episode plot points, in the case that anybody after this review wants to watch the show for themselves. And any show with crime or mystery is best seen going in blind, so these will all be spoiler-free overviews. The plot involves a model train convention going off the rails and getting destroyed, and what's initially deemed to be an accident is quickly revealed to be deliberate sabotage. There's also a side plot involving the death of Fillmore's fish. They do a good job tackling the themes of loss and change, and they cleverly incorporate it into the main plot as well. My favorite part of this episode has to be the convention destruction scene. From the cinematography to the character reactions, and this great shot of a toy helicopter over the model wreckage.
The miniature humanity.
No! No!
Get her out of here!
This scene is both dramatic and comical. It's the perfect example of Fillmore being enjoyably exaggerative. From its action to its dialogue, this is a really well-rounded episode. This episode deals with the case of sabotage against the Vampirita fan club. Vampirita being a fantasy horror novel about a vampire astronaut in space. Yes, you heard that correctly. The prime suspects are members of the rival Citizen Fang fan club. Citizen Fang is a werewolf senator.
Citizen Fang, werewolf senator.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Lesser wolves beware, there's a new pack leader in town and he's in Congress. It's like, what are his policies? Who is he running against? Is he like the dog president from Dragon Ball? I have so many questions. This episode speaks on the subject of fandoms, and especially to a preteen demographic, it's a very relatable and relevant subject. It's an overall solid episode with a number of odd yet fun characters. But for all of its positives, the ending chase scene is so short that it's practically unnecessary. I know it's a part of every episode, but in this case, it might have been better if they didn't instigate a chase at all. However, there's a plot point that gets resolved at the end that honestly I think makes up for it. I also give this episode points for calling out Fillmore's destruction of property.
I ain't made of money. Folsom's coming down on me about the budget.
It's nice that they acknowledge that Fillmore's needless trashing of beloved floor waxers has consequences.
Stump, I need your waxer.
Be good to her. She's all I got.
He said be good to her, Fillmore, and you let her die. A Vallejo-focused episode, the plot involves a serial paper shredder simply called the Shredder, who's been going around destroying student projects. For this case, Vallejo enlists the help of his old partner, Frank Bishop, who's not exactly willing to help him due to events in the past. The character of Frank Bishop is one of my favorite parts of this episode. Not only does he give a good performance, but we also get some good character moments with him and Vallejo, as we learn about their relationship and what drove them apart. This episode has heart, a good plot twist, and believe it or not, Folsom the Musical.
Down through the hallowed hall, this time, together I put it all.
Various bullies at X are being targeted, and Fillmore and Ingrid have to unmask the culprit. The subject matter of bullies is pretty commonplace for a kids show, but the way that Fillmore tackles the subject isn't like your typical kids show. There's a surprising amount of honesty and realism in its messaging. Another example of the maturity in Fillmore's writing. I can't really get into it without spoiling the episode, so you're gonna have to see it for yourself. This episode has a bunch of quirky characters, an entertaining chase scene, and it's commendable for its unique take on an age-old topic. And it also has bodyguard O'Farrell, and he is just a gem.
Back way, 4 feet. Hey, retainer, that means you.
Debatably my favorite episode in the series, the plot involves a group of kids trying to steal the answer sheet for a pre-algebra exam. Fillmore stays overnight at the school to protect it, but a raging snowstorm leaves Fillmore by himself to defend the test against the gang of thieves. This episode's lone cop against a group of villains plot is reminiscent to Die Hard, and I think it's an intentional reference. While this episode doesn't have a clever case to solve, because the villains are introduced early on, it has a unique setup, great action scenes, a solid antagonist, and some meaningful dialogue. There's a number of tense moments throughout, and it's an engaging episode from start to finish. Like I said, this show has tons of great episodes, and there's only one that I would call genuinely lousy, and that's the 19th Hole is a Shallow Grave. The plot revolves around the X-Middle School Mini-Masters Mini-Golf Tournament. Say that 3 times fast. The X-Middle School Mini-Masters Mini-Golf Tournament. The X-Middle School Mini-Masters Mini-Golf Tournament. The X-Middle School Mini-Masters Mini-Golf Tournament. Fillmore and Ingrid are sent to investigate a player by the name of Cuzzy Shotwell, who questionably threw the match. While there's a good character story with Fillmore and some entertaining scenes with Caddy O'Farrell, this episode is flawed. And I can boil it down to 3 major problems. Number 1, the villain is too obvious. Not even halfway through the episode, you can tell who the villain is. And there's no clever red herring or other possible suspect. I mean, they pretty much announce it to everyone. Number 2, we barely get to hear from Cuzzy, the character in which this case revolves around. We only get one significant talking scene between him and the officers, and that's it. A crucial part of any Fillmore episode is hearing from the other characters, getting to know their personality and motivations. But we just don't get that from Cuzzy. Number 3. As the plot progresses, there's a shift in our hero's objective that could have made this a slightly better episode. But then at the end it gets contradicted, and it sours our hero's victory. And it's really just one small detail that ruins what they were working towards. They were so close, but they messed up. The most surprising thing about this episode is that it was actually written by Scott Gimple. Yes, the creator wrote the worst episode of his own show. I guess he was having an off day or something, because this episode doesn't measure up with the rest. In conclusion, Fillmore is an excellent show. Its unique brand of flashy characters and crime solving is a lot of fun. But like I said in the intro, it's also a show that got lost to time. And that's really the biggest crime of them all. The series was planned for a 3rd season, but ultimately it was cancelled in favor of other shows. And I would have loved to see another season of Fillmore. There were still a ton of possibilities for cool stories. For one, I would have loved to see an episode about Fillmore getting drafted into the safety patrol.
I got busted boosting a chalk shipment. The safety patroller who busted me gave me a choice. Either help him crack another case, or spend the rest of middle school in detention. And I helped out.
That was Officer Wayne Liggett, who would eventually become Fillmore's first partner and close friend. An episode detailing that specific case would have made for a great story. Or imagine if they had a 2-part episode. They could already pack a lot of great content into one episode, so imagine what they could do with more time and a longer story. Point is, Fillmore had a lot more to give, and it's a shame it never got to. If you're looking for some top-notch animated preteen cop action, well then you have some very specific tastes. But regardless, if that sounds appealing to you, then I highly recommend Disney's Fillmore. And that about wraps things up. I'm Andyb, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if I make another, I'll see you then. Take it easy.